The cannibalized career of liberalism in colonial India. C.M. Bailey, Recovering Liberties, Indian Thought in the Age of Liberalism and Empire, Cambridge University Press, 2012. The interpretation of liberalism as a project that not only makes masks but enables political domination has long held currency in South Asian historiography. Recently, the subject of liberalism and empire in both Francophone and Anglophone contexts have returned to discussions in broader imperial historiography. One especially pressing question that emerges from these approaches is how to analyze intellectuals of colonized countries such as India, who themselves claimed liberal terminologies and pressed forth liberal arguments. Are they to be assessed by the same criteria as European liberals who argued for the rights of the individual, the free press, the individual property rights, and the individual property rights? Significant scholarly attention has been placed on Ram Mohan Roy, the iconic philosopher, political theorist, and reformer, and by most accounts, the first liberal of India. However, though Roy's life is well documented and researched, like that of the Calcutta in the era of the British East India Company in which he lived, the Indian intellectual landscape from Roy's death in 1833 through the rest of colonial India regarding Indian liberal thought and practice is quite hazily understood. One particular strand of historiography deems the search for an indigenous Indian liberal tradition actually quite useless and perhaps impossible, as the radicalized distinctions of colonial India were so stark and the ideological walls that liberalism itself built so impenetrable that liberalism for Indians was simply not possible. Another strand argues that Indians, after the Roy movement of the 1820s, moved away from liberalism towards culturalism, a form of Indian nationalism that emerged out of the misrecognition of the materialist foundation of the abstract subject in the category of abstract labor in capitalism. And yet, in his new book, Recovering Liberty, C.A. Bailey has set out to document and examine a range of Indian intellectuals, reformers, and philosophers who, for him, were liberals, and through them he has attempted to tell the story of Indian liberalism writ large. Is the enterprise itself to chart Indian liberal thought in the colonial period an intellectually tenable one, as Bailey himself suggested in his earlier and landmark The Birth of the Modern World? Liberalism was Western expansionist except for Ram Mohan Roy. He gestured to a broader world of liberalism beyond Ram Mohan Roy without providing any substantive details in this work. He addresses what happens when he takes that further step. A revision of his Wilde's lecture given at the Queen's University of Belfast in 2007, Bailey Recovering Liberties, offers a synthetic and at times a detailed view of Indian liberalism history from the 1780s to 1950, claiming that liberalism was much more than a discourse masking the exercise of social and political power. Bailey argues that liberalism was instead a cultural project inclusive of political representation, the obligations of the state, or the basic meaning of the good life for Indians. This cultural project included a range of religious and other influences specific to Indian and distinguished liberal politics as particularly Indian. Bailey details in the introduction how liberalism in India had elective affinities with Euro-American ideals, but emphasizes that even if Europeans or Americans set the broad term of debate, Indians did not simply copy Western ideas from the texts they received through metropolitan sources, but cannibalized, reconstructed, and reauthored like those ideas. What made Indian liberalism distinctive in Bailey's argument was that Bailey's account was that unlike British liberalism, Indian liberalism was embattled from the beginning by powerful ideologies that largely rejected it, including communalism, Hindu nationalism, subaltern revolt, and other such challenges. A concern for private property, a free press, and rights for free association linked Indian liberals to their European counterparts, but Bailey describes how Indian liberals selectively used elements of Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, and Muslim traditions as well as various types of historicism specific to Indian intellectuals circles within their liberalism. This distinguished Indian liberalism from being a mere copy of liberalism in the best. Bailey of Bailey, Bailey offers a methodological principle that he maintains throughout the work of sustaining both an upward developing out of actual human experiences and downward proceeding from intellectual to affect everyday life. Hermeneutic strategy for understanding the history of ideas. Bailey contextualizes Indian liberal thought from 1800 to 1850 in British, European, and US arenas to develop the notion of a global or trans-regional sphere of intellectual history, with a primary focus on the great Indian liberal Ram Mohan Roy, termed by Bailey a proleptic civic republican. Roy, like many British liberals, focused on issues like the constitution, juries, and a free press. His emphasis on the constitution linked him to British radicals like Samuel Burdett, Sir Richard John Cartwright, and William Cobbett, and also presaged later Indian thinkers like Jyotirao Phule, Mahadev Govind Ranade, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Major protagonists in later colonial India, Ram Mohan Roy, Dwarkanath Tagore, and others like Ram Raj in Madras, debated amongst themselves about the way juries should be composed as well as the role of free press freedom and public order. Bailey points to a landscape built by Roy but nonetheless inclusive of several other voices beyond Bengal. In particular Bailey builds his analysis of liberalism beyond Roy with the consideration of Bal Sastri Jambekar, a direct parallel to Ram Mohan Roy. In the work of Jambekar, Bailey finds condemnations of sati, the practice of widow immolation, first critiqued in the modern era by Ram Roy himself, which led to the evolution of the practice. Nach dance practices and other local traditions. Bailey grounds this discussion in global themes such as the worldwide assault on slavery. Indians often couch their critiques of local traditions in languages of slavery and abolition, and a concern with human progress, while also yoking it to the specifics of Indian issues and the reform of religious practices not deemed progressive. Through examples like Jambekar and others, Bailey shows how a generation of Indians from the 1830s to 1860s to the 1860s created a sociological imagination, a notions of class and oppression, but not derivative of, but analogous to Euro-American notions of slavery and disempowerment. In a further expansion of his analysis of liberalism beyond Roy, Bailey looks at newspapers, educational foundations, law, public meetings, and learned societies such as the Bethune Society, the Dalhousie Society, the British Indian Association, and other attached to Calcutta. He shows how liberals were imbued with the forensic and oratorical skills honed in the Brahmo Samaj, a society aimed at reforming Hinduism and Indian religion, began by Ram Mohan Roy himself in the 1820s. As the colonial Indian context dictated that race and other controversial topics were officially banned, Indians focused on issues like true religion, true science, and good literature. Within this foundation, he discusses pivotal 19th century thinkers like Girish Chandra Ghosh, Bholanath Chandra, Keshav Chandra Sen, and B.M. Malabari, all of these thinkers cre- created what Belly terms banning banning sociology of India, or selective appropriations of metropolitan discourses of race and cultural differentiation to describe an emergent modern Indian cultural landscape. This Benin sociology was enacted by these writers as they traveled to different portions of India and in the service of liberal reform of Indian cultural practices. All of these thinkers had deep ties to the public worlds of learned societies, newspapers, and Western education. However, as opposed to merely mimicking 19th century race science, these men imagined a cultural order in India influenced by 19th century European thought about hierarchy in caste, race, language, and religion, but through their own empirical observations and in the service of the reform of outmoded rituals and corrupted religious practices. This was significant as these Indian thinkers would place the worlds of witnesses on display and situate class hierarchy, alcohol consumption, and greed in the West as equally in need of reform as Indian practices such as child marriage and the bigotry evident by certain caste groups. In addition to creating a ban the sociology of India, these liberals initiated a reform of what Bailey terms counter-preaching, which involved addressing certain criticisms back to the colonial power. From the 1840s to 1880s, in what Bailey calls the maturing of Benin sociology, Indian liberals incorporated aspects of their education and training in Western subjects such as statistics and economics to critique the politics of colonial government. Counter-preaching in action was initiated by a range of thinkers including Girish Chandra Ghosh, Feroz Shah Mehta, Kishori Chandra Mitra, Radhabhai Nehru, J.R.C. Dutt, and Pran Nath Saraswati. Using statistics, Ghosh and R.C. Dutt, for example, argued that impoverishment and famine were not natural outcomes of human improvidence and overpopulation, but rather derived from excessive enhancements of rent and extra market coercion. Mitra in 1866 directly critiqued John Stuart Mill's proscriptions against state action during famine by advocating for state intervention and enhanced irrigation in times of crisis, contravening liberal orthodoxy at the time. This demonstrates how Indians were not only close readers but also critics of liberal thought in colonial India. Meanwhile, other liberals like Nauroji Malabari, Kesav Vidyabhushan, and Telang all used philological, textual, and various historicist arguments to develop ideas of an Indian political economy and the rationality and value of Indian religious and literary cultures. As Bailey succinctly puts it, they proclaimed India's racial and civilizational equality with the West, using increasingly sophisticated historicist arguments and fashioning an original political ethics out of fragments of Western arguments and the Shastras. The ending years of colonial India are examined through individuals like Radha Kamal Mukherjee and B.R. Ambedkar. Bailey shows how these liberals were deeply invested in the central tenets of liberalism, but also committed to reworking Indian textual traditions and histories, as well as using Indian data to rework theoretical and political models of liberalism. This serves as an example of the upward hermeneutic in action. Ambedkar, the best known in the global Anglophone world, represents a transformation and reorganization of principles once described by Ram Mohan. The ancient constitution to protect the vulnerable, India as a federal unity, and the working of religion in society as the origin and guarantee of human sympathy and intercommunication. A long analysis of Ambedkar demonstrates Bailey's thesis. Indian liberals were at once engaging their own traditions and at the same appropriating and critiquing existing liberalism to better serve the needs of Indians. Bailey concludes by reflecting on the long life of liberalism by stating that liberalism was a broad field on which Indians and other South Asians began not only to resist colonial rule but to engage in debates about the good life as would be citizens of a global republic. India, according to Bailey, has its own Sonderweg. Indians clung to representative government and democracy in the face of colonial oppression, mass murder, endemic corruption, and restrictions based on caste reservations and more economic inequality. The long-lasting nature of liberalism is not for Bailey as a result of colonial imposition, as British liberal ideas were deconstructed and reassembled to reflect Indian conditions and structures of thought. These Indian structures of thought included Indic and Indo-Islamic textual and lived conditions and leavened by tropes and themes from Indian classics, Neo-Vedanta, and particularly the Bhagavad Gita. His final statement on liberalism relates to the durability and longevity of liberal ideas in India. Indian liberalism as a diffuse sentiment and a set of loose political practices has apparently outlasted socialist centralization, Gandhiism, and even thus far Hindutva. Going beyond Ram Mohan Roy as a difficult task, and Bailey succeeds in identifying and productively analyzing a range of thinkers who may be new to South Asian historians and of whom other audiences have certainly not heard. This success is derived from his survey approach, as the book is a compendium of lectures. However, his analysis of most of his figures who wrote and lived after the death of Ram Mohan Roy remains superficial in large part because it is tethered mostly to English translations. He includes a selected bibliography with a few Hindi titles, but most of his citations in the text are from secondary sources, biographies, collected speeches, and English language newspaper articles. This approach stems again from his effort to produce a survey, but for a serious consideration of a subject that requires substantial analysis of ideas as they were originally expressed. It is odd that Bailey offers no discussion of how to deal with Indian linguistic diversity, modes of reading across languages or linguistic contexts, or the methodological issues raised when using English translations. Furthermore, using only English for prolific thinkers who wrote in Sanskrit, Persian, Bengali, Marathi, Hindi, Urdu, and a few other languages leads to a methodological point about liberalism's coherence and ability to possibly transcend. Particularly in 2004, Bailey recommended an approach to global intellectual history which leaves room for innovative political thought, yet stresses the resilience of old ideas of good government and proper deportment in emerging social and political movements. In Recovering Liberties, Bailey provides an example of this strategy in his attempt to situate liberalism in India, outside Roy and beyond Bengal after the early 1800s. He does this by focusing continually on the Indic sources for Indian liberals and the lived experiences of Indians on the ground, interpreted by a range of thinkers in various languages, such as the rights of Siemens and the representation of Indians on juries and localized and quotidian forms of discrimination, emerge as central for Indian liberals. By focusing on these themes, he manages to put less lesser known figures such as Jambekar and Radha Kamal Mukherjee into conversation with much more familiar thinkers such as Girish Chandra Ghosh, Keshav Chandra Sen, Saeed Ahmad Khan, and Saeed Amir Ali. However, Bailey also consistently refers to Indians as avatars of other Indians and non-Indians. Ram Mohan Roy Bailey says is the Bengali Benjamin Constant Bal Shastri. Jambekar is a Maharashtrian Ram Mohan Roy. Christopher Elliott is a Ceylonese Buckingham. Prannath Saraswati, an antagonistic version of William Gladstone. Radha Kamal Mukherjee, the Indian Spencer. What is to be gained by doing this? The continual use of various cultural labels or personifications implies that liberalism was created somewhere else as a coherent set of ideas in Great Britain by and large, or by Ram Mohan Roy as the originator of Indian liberalism, and then Indianized and regionalized later as Indians cannibalized, reconstructed and reauthored liberal ideas, using them to assault the moral derelictions of their rulers. If indeed Indians went so far as to reauthor these ideas into a manner that was not necessarily comprehensible as liberal, why classify them as liberal in the first place? On the other hand, if the canvas of liberalism is so large, then why continually define these iterations as Indian? Why are not the Indian components worthy of transcending the label Indian? After all, the premise of Bailey's argument is that British liberals were never merely British. This avoidance of a clearer route towards identifying what is liberal in the Indian thoughts leads Bailey to continually mention elective affinities between Indians and non-Indian thinkers. These observations are tantalizing but are not pursued in any systematic philological, textual, prosopographic or sociological way. Therefore, readers are left with the image of free-floating conjectures. For example, in his section on the anti-caste reformer B.R. Ambedkar, Bailey discusses his affinity with the Dewey tradition. Dewey himself emerged from the Unitarian free-thinking and anti-slavery tradition that had an early Indian analogy in Ram Mohan's Hindu Unitarianism and the anti-casteism of Phule in Jambekar John Maharashtra. Equally, Bose has emerged from the Universalist tradition represented by Alexander von Humboldt, which was given new force by the 1848 revolutions. This maze of linkages claims that a global conjuncture of anti-racism and anti-casteism coalesced in Ambedkar form a tapestry of influences. But what are we to make of this jumble of conjunctures in which many thinkers across the Anglo-American, European, Indian spectrum share a deep affinity? What explains this deep affinity without providing a systematic consideration of whether the ideas of Ambedkar, Radha Kamal Mukherjee and others are perceived and received as liberal both in Indian intellectual traditions and in Indian society? It is difficult to accept the blanket definition of these thinkers as Indian liberal. The microscopic problem of Bailey's linkages is connected to the macroscopic difficulty of the relationship between hegemony and formation of ideas. Bailey mentioned how nearly All Indians in his study has been the victims of direct racist humiliation at some point in their lives. In the first substantiation of his upward hermeneutic approach to his cites Lascars, Simmons and their relation to rights and property. According to Bailey, this prompted the first iterations of liberal discussions in the 1820s and 1830s, as it was in relation to a different type of right, those of mobile people, cementers, and Indian soldiers, that some of the earliest Indian theories of modern political society were generated. This is a powerful proposition, but can it be sustained as a coherent case for the upward hermeneutic at work? Precisely how much of Indian discussions of rights was based on in recognition of mobile people and not landed rights, but how much of the racism and lived experiences of colonial India reforms informs these ideas? Does the lived environment of racism, segregation, and violence merely provide a backdrop for liberal ideas? Does it transform ideas into a shape that may not be recognizable in a metropolitan form? These questions relate to the salvo launched by Partha Chatterjee in his recent Black Hole of Empire: History of a Global Practice of Power. It contains a critique of Bailey's analysis of Roy in the preview form published in this journal in 2007. In Chatterjee's view, after the 1820s, it was impossible to Indianize, given the racism and civilizational difference that liberalism itself relied upon to continue the sort of abstract liberalism initiated by Roy in the 1800s and 1810s. Chatterjee states that there can be no linear history of liberalism in India, from the battles in the early 19th century over a free press or the rights of Indians to sit on a jury to the liberal democratic constitution of the Republic of India in 1950. Chatterjee asserts that early 19th century battles over a free press, in which Roy played a key role, which verified details occurred in a space of interracial interaction commingling. Recovering Liberty functions partially as an extended response to Chatterjee's exposition. Bailey does not offer a linear history, but does presume that Indian liberalism after Ram Mohan Roy comprised a coherent set of ideas developed by many diverse Indian thinkers working in different languages, such as Jambekar, B.R. Ambedkar, Radhakamal Mukherjee, Girish Chandra Ghosh, and Keshav Chandra Sen, as well as figures often not examined in South Asian history like Munshi Abdullah, Lembong King, B. M. Malabari, James T. Alves, and S.W. R.D. Bandaranaike. Bailey simply does not enter into a debate about liberalism's relation to empire, but he rather identifies and probes how Indian thinkers in the colonial period thought about liberty. When read with Chatterjee in mind, Bailey's approach makes sense only if readers accept his claim unsupported by any sustained investigation that the defense of such liberties was more than a mask of power. The claim itself depends on the vigorous nature of Bailey's framework. Since India is now a parliamentary democracy with functioning liberal institutions, Bailey's regions liberalism was the core idea that enabled the creation of the contemporary Indian state. Another interpretation of the present day Indian state would show the vitality of Indian state institutions through the contingencies of decolonization, affected much more by global changes brought about by World War II and financial and intellectual international system-based politics that emerged in the 1940s. If this interpretation is addressed, the intellectual landscape of Indian thinkers in the colonial period would then belong to a different sort of world. Anti-colonial thinkers like B.R. Ambedkar, Radha Kamal Mukherjee, and others may have incorporated aspects of liberalism into their own anti-colonial and perhaps other yet and as yet unnamed types of political thought. The trouble is that if the historical nuances of decolonization supplemented Bailey's interpretation of many of the figures under review, those figures might cease to fit in any recognizable category of liberal, or being liberal for colonial Indians may simply have been so different to being liberal in metropolitan European locales that the overarching appellation "liberal" may simply be unhelpful. In his latest volume, Bailey goes beyond his magisterial birth of the modern world and continues to stimulate a vibrant current debate about the nature of modern ideas, and institution, institutions and networks in global frameworks, identifying under-researched figures, isolating methods of intellectual history for India, and inquiring about the nature of liberalism in the waning rays of the British Empire in India will spur future scholars of the topic into newly productive territory. In particular, Bailey's meticulous and insightful attention to the intellectual world outside Bengal and beyond Ram Mohan Roy will surely inspire fresh research and fresh readings. But what is the value of categorizing colonial India's past in Bailey's particular way? Sorry. Reflecting on this particular point leads one to another, to consider Thomas Babington Macaulay's infamous Mint on Education of 1835, in which the great liberal announced the intention of the East India Company to produce a class Indian in blood and color, but English in taste and opinions, in morals and in intellect, rather than accept the glitched actualization of Macaulay's fantastical Indias, would be in blood, and color, but English in taste in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. Bailey has instead offered a wide-ranging history of Indians whose tastes, opinions, morals, and intellects were not at all constrained by such a false dichotomy, but he has also produced in reverse the 19th century liberal tendency to project back into history now after decolonization, post-colonialism, and intellectual resurrections about the meaning and purpose of history narrative that explains the present day of India. Because liberalism is shorn of any complexity with hegemony. Bailey ignores the way the liberal state, like the colonial state before it, has developed its various powers at times through declaring a national concept exception and at times through brute force, and never by contravening its reputatively liberal origins. Without engaging such history and its relation to the formation of ideas, Bailey brings liberalism into a trans-historical, mystical set of ideas that individual Indians were free to use for their own purposes. As Bailey states on his first page, Indian liberal ideas were foundational to all forms of Indian nationalism, and the country's modern politics. One might be tempted to believe by reading about all the star-studded Indians in the book who appear alongside the Cobbetts, Mills, Constants, and others, but only if one relates from the question the complications of power and hegemony that go into the making of ideas themselves. Dhanyavad. Thank you so much.